Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We now hear a keynote speech by Megan Roberts. She is Director for Policy Planning at the United Nations Foundation. She will give us some insight into the United Nations and their mission. We're pleased to have you here with us, Megan, and I will now cede the stage to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophia, and hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. As Sophia mentioned, I'm Megan Roberts, Director of Policy Planning at the United Nations Foundation, and I'm just absolutely thrilled to be here as part of Blockchain Central UNGA. It's an honor to be part of such an important event and discussion, which I know is also part of Global Goals Week, which aims to drive action toward achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And we at the United Nations Foundation work every day to advance the 17 SDGs, which together represent our blueprint to achieving a better and more sustainable future. And part of my work is to help understand the role of new technologies in advancing the goals, but also how the UN can work with others to maximize the benefits and minimize the potential risks of new technologies. I know that many of you spend your days at the cutting edge of blockchain and other technologies, so I probably can't tell you anything new about how those technologies work. But what I want to share with you today in my remarks is how the UN, an institution that is turning 75 years old, and that isn't often thought of as a technology organization, is putting new technologies to work to help millions of people around the world. This isn't to say that the UN is new to technology, and in fact, one of the UN's first orders of business after its founding was to pass a resolution on what was at the time a new technology, atomic energy. But if we think about the new technologies of today and those of tomorrow, and realizing that all of this can feel a little bit remote and a little bit idealistic, I'd like to start with an example. As many of you are likely aware, even as COVID has so many of us locked in place for months, the world is in the midst of an unprecedented surge in the number of people who have been displaced from their homes due to conflict, persecution, and natural disasters like flooding, fires, or hurricanes. And the UN plays a central role in ensuring that people who have been forced from their homes are safe and receive critical support and services. When war broke out in Syria in 2011, millions of Syrians fled their homes into neighboring countries. Jordan alone took in hundreds of thousands of refugees. The World Food Program is one agency at the UN that is on the ground quickly in times of crisis, and it has been actively working in Jordan since the start of the Syrian crisis, providing refugees with food support. But sometimes traditional means of food support, either buying and delivering bulk food or setting up a bank account so that individuals can buy their own food, are not effective solutions. Buying and delivering food is expensive, and it can distort local markets. Bank accounts can also be challenging, as those fleeing persecution could lack the identification documents required, and transferring funds is also expensive and can take time, as this group knows well. With these limits in mind, in 2016, the World Food Program began an ambitious project to directly deliver cash assistance with blockchain. The project, called Building Blocks for Zero Hunger, now supports 100,000 Syrian refugees in Jordan. The program is providing much needed assistance in a way that's safer, that's more timely, that's less expensive, and that preserves human agency. And across the UN system, innovators are exploring how they can leverage blockchain and other new technologies to solve long-standing development challenges. In Ecuador, UNDP worked with cocoa farmers to develop the world's first value-shared cocoa chocolate bar, ensuring that farmers are able to earn a decent living and help them protect the environment by putting the supply chain on blockchain. And UNICEF, the UN's agency for children, has invested in blockchain startups for years. Just last year stood up a cryptocurrency fund to support open source technology benefiting children around the world. In fact, there's such energy around exploring blockchain solutions at the UN that this year the UN Innovation Network established a dedicated group focused on learning about and testing new blockchain-based solutions. And it's not only blockchain, of course, from using drones to deliver life-saving vaccines, to using satellites to better understand the effects of climate change. The UN is exploring how it can use new technologies to advance the SDGs and to help people around the world. And this year, UN actors moved quickly to respond to the COVID pandemic in innovative ways. The World Health Organization has established a groundbreaking partnership called the ACT Accelerator to share access to COVID-19 testing, technologies, and eventually vaccines. And it quickly brought together experts from around the world to tackle the tidal wave of COVID-related misinformation, so toxic that the WHO deemed it an infodemic. UNICEF partnered with Microsoft to develop a global online learning platform as schools around the world closed. And UNICEF is also putting to work its big data initiative called Magic Box to provide data, tools, and insights to tackle COVID, working with research institutions and the private sector. And these examples also demonstrate another important aspect of this work, partnerships. UN is really working in partnership with experts across all sectors, businesses, civil society, governments, technologists. It knows that it can learn from these partners and that together they can achieve much more than they could alone. And it's also pairing these tech-enabled partnerships with efforts to harness innovation across its work, from foresight capacities to behavioral insights to low-tech solutions to new ways of working together across the UN system. So this isn't just about using the latest technology or the shiniest new tools. It's really about thinking deeply about how the UN does its work, the processes and the models that it uses, and the ecosystems within which it works. And as the UN puts new technology and innovation to work to deliver better around the world, it's also fostering a global effort on how we can all work together to ensure a safe and equitable digital future. Because even as we can appreciate the immense benefits that we see that the digital transformation, we also see that the digital transformation is not unfolding evenly. It's leaving people behind, and it's also opening new risks that our current means of cooperation just are not yet tackling. So to name just a few, the first barrier is connectivity. Nearly half of the world's population remains offline. And even those who are able to connect may not be able to do so at the needed speeds, or the cost may be so high that the internet really in practice is out of reach. And this is just one way that this transformation is threatening to worsen inequality around the world. And then once people do get online, in addition to opening up an incredible number of doors to learning and finance and jobs and socializing, internet access also opens the door to malicious actors. And cyber attacks threaten individual safety and pose even larger risks to societies. And at a broader level, authoritarian governments are harnessing digital tools to exert ever greater control and to curtail human rights as disinformation campaigns disrupt and sow chaos in political processes around the world. And although digital technologies have proven absolutely indispensable this year, as we moved online to work, to learn, and to do basically everything else, and really to participate in any meaningful way, social and economic life, COVID-19 has also sharpened all of these risks. The digital divide is now leaving hundreds of millions of children without access to education, and hundreds of millions of adults without access to jobs and critical government services. And I want to emphasize that this is not a phenomenon only in developing countries. I'm speaking to you from the United States, where an estimated 12 million children were not able to access online learning this year. And as the coronavirus has snaked around the globe, so too has this global surge in mis and disinformation about the pandemic that threatens lives and safety. And as healthcare facilities and research facilities around the world set to work on understanding COVID-19 and developing a vaccine, they were also hit by an absolute barrage of cyber attacks amidst an overall increase in attacks and criminal behavior online. As governments tried to flatten the curve in their countries, many have rolled out new and powerful means of tracing and surveilling their populations, which may prove too tempting to roll back once the threat of the pandemic fades. And all of this is set against the backdrop of deepening geopolitical fissures that we can't ignore in this discussion and that are threatening the global nature of the internet itself. So we know that new technologies offer such incredible promise, but for them to really deliver requires a functioning international system and healthy and agile means of cooperation and setting the rules of the road. And although the UN is very upfront that it knows it cannot solve this challenge on its own, over the past 2 years, it has worked to serve as a platform for global discussions on how things are working today and what's needed looking into the future. In 2018, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, himself an engineer by training, launched a high-level panel to assess the current state of how the world was working together in the digital world and to provide recommendations for the future. The Secretary General brought together an all-star group to tackle this ambitious mandate. He appointed Melinda Gates and Jack Ma, two household names hailing from the United States and China, respectively, to serve as co-chairs of the panel, which comprised members of government, of civil society, of the tech sector, of businesses, and it included members from all regions of the world, all age groups. It was gender balanced. It was really the most diverse high-level panel the UN has stood up. And it brought together a wide range of expertise. Kathy Mulligan, an expert on blockchain and digital transformations, was part of the group, which also included one of the fathers of the internet, a Nobel Prize winner, experts in connectivity and access and human rights and development. And the group circled the world to speak with as many people and organizations as possible to better understand how we can make the most of digital technologies and how we can better prepare to tackle their risks head on. Their work surfaced a number of very important priority issue areas across connectivity, inclusion, human rights and human agency, artificial intelligence, and global digital cooperation. And building on this, in June of this year, the UN set out its own roadmap for the future of digital cooperation and how it would work in partnership across sectors to develop and work toward a safer and more equitable digital future. And the roadmap is clear that this work really does require engagement of all sectors and cannot be the work of governments alone. And it makes concrete commitments across three pillars. We can call them connect, respect, and protect. So to connect everyone to the internet by 2030, to respect human rights and human agency online, and to protect everyone, particularly the world's most vulnerable, from online harms. And as part of this work, next year, the Secretary General will appoint a technology envoy who will serve as both an advocate and as a port of call on digital cooperation at the UN. So where do we go from here? Next week, nations around the world will come together to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. And as part of this historic event, countries will confirm, for the first time at that level of heads of state, the critical role of digital technologies, including to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and they will commit to improving digital cooperation. That the meeting will be mostly virtual only underscores the central role of digital technologies in our lives. And it represents an important political moment, with heads of state agreeing that digital cooperation is a priority, along with issues like climate change, poverty, and tackling global health threats. But of course, we can't be naive. A UN resolution is important, but this certainly doesn't mean that the hard work is done. And we have to be frank that there are structural reasons why some of these obstacles in our path exist. But the stakes really are simply too high, and the costs are too great, both in opportunities lost, but also in risks of backsliding on progress that the world has achieved over the last several decades. And this underscores the need to work together, an imperative that I know is very strong in the blockchain community. And it also means that there's a role for everyone. So I'm really looking forward to the discussions here to see where and how we can partner together on this important work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Megan. We so appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Your keynote was not only informative, but also uplifting for what lies ahead in our future if we all band together.